Good morning, everyone. Kevin Glagore here from Skywatcher USA, and welcome to another episode of the What's Up Webcast. We do this every Friday, 10 a.m. Pacific, right here at the Skywatcher USA YouTube channel. We cover everything from what's up in the nighttime sky to equipment to helpful tips and tricks. And of course, at the end of the month, we have a special guest to talk about their specialty in the field of astronomy. This is a pre recorded episode just because of the scheduling that we had to do for this. But this is airing on July 28th for those of you who are watching this in the future. All the episodes for the What's Up webcast are all recorded afterwards. They're generally live episodes, so you can always go back to our catalog and check out any of the episodes that you might have missed. But to get started, because we've got a lot to go through today, I'm going to bring in Christopher Go. If you're not aware of Chris is a world-class planetary imager. He does amazing work on Jupiter, Saturn, and pretty much any planet he can get his hands on. So we're going to bring in Chris, and we'll go through everything he's got to offer today. So good morning, Chris. How you doing?
Good morning. Great. I'm in foggy San Diego right now.
Oh, okay. I know you were visiting the U.S.
Yeah,
For work. I didn't know which, because you've been bouncing around. I didn't know which part of California you're in at the moment. So.
yeah. It's nice here because it's kind of cool compared to the other parts of California.
Yeah, San Diego's quite nice.
Yeah. Anyway, so we're going to talk about modern planetary imaging. We're going to go through what planetary imaging is about. So let's begin. We're going to do a screen share here. Okay. So
There we go.
okay, here we go. Slideshow. So we're going to talk basically the whole thing about planetary imaging. This is just an introduction. Um, this is not going to be a thorough because if it were thorough, it'll probably take about 5 hours. But at any rate, we'll go through, you know, um, basically modern planetary imaging. Now, basically, planetary imaging, I don't know, with other deep sky imaging, it's about fighting the atmosphere to get the highest resolution possible. The problem, the limitation we have here on Earth is having an atmosphere. The problem is that we cannot take away the atmosphere because we don't die. So there are ways to fight the atmosphere. First of all, to get out of the atmosphere, we send space telescopes into space. There they can image, the perfect image. No light pollution, no bad seeing. Everything is perfect. The second is adaptive optics, which is a relatively new technology, or not necessarily new. It's probably about 20 years old, or actually it's very old. I mean, I would say it's 30, 40 years old, but became declassified probably 20 years ago. This was first invented by the National Security Agency, not to image stars, but to read the plate number from satellites, the plate number of your car from orbiting satellites. Now, this technology was given to astronomy, and right now it's being used by professional astronomers. Uh, a few years ago, probably 30 years ago, there was a company that sold out of here in San Diego that sold adaptive optics, but it was prohibitively expensive. Now, the problem with the first two methods, it's way beyond our budget. Probably some with Elon Musk wealth might be able to afford it, but most of us, it's way beyond our budget. So we do actually what is called lucky imaging. Lucky imaging was invented in the 70s by some professional astronomers in IRTF, and what it does really is basically taking a video of the planet using a video cam, and a video is basically a set of thousands of images. So when you're able to capture so much images, one thing you can do is feed it into the software, and the software can choose the good and bad, and stack the good, and you reject the bad. Now, this lucky imaging came about with a lot of things. Many things came into place. First of all, inexpensive video recording devices. When we started doing planetary imaging, I think in the year 2000, we were using webcams. It was the infancy of the webcam. Remember, in the year 2000, I think most of the people had dial-ups. It wasn't really We don't have the high-speed internet that we have right now, but we started with dial-ups, so you can imagine the speed of the cameras during that time. Another thing that the important development is the computer hardware. When I started using the computer, the only thing I have of communication were the serial port and the parallel port. The serial is, I think, about how many? Uh, uh, at most 2400 or 5000 bps, and the parallel port is about 300 bps. BPS, not even kilo. It's very slow. And now we have a USB 3.2, which can transfer gigs of data in seconds. And the most important development is the software, where we have some amateur astronomers writing free softwares, first of all, to control the camera, and secondly, of course, to process our images. So these things just fell into place that allowed planetary imaging, the modern way of planetary imaging, to exist. Before, we used to use film, but the resolution of film is nowhere near to what we're getting with new digital devices that we have. In fact, many would say that a lot of our image are very, very close to spacecraft quality uh, about 30, 40 years ago. So this is a summary of the talk. We're going to talk about the right equipment, choosing the right equipment. Uh, the next, we're going to talk about the imaging workflow. I have a set of workflows to work with because, first of all, I'd like to clarify that my philosophy is not to basically to get the best image. Well, sometimes we get best image, but I don't really use complex processing to get the best possible image. I have a limitation. I have a day job. I have a family, and my wife won't be happy if I spend too much time in astronomy. So I keep everything very simple. That's why I have a workflow that helps me do things as simple and as fast as possible. Besides, when you're imaging at 3 in the morning, when your brain is working only about probably 20, 30%, it's good to have a workflow, a routine that will help you go through things very fast. Now, we're talking about which equipment to choose. The right equipment, the telescope, camera, and accessories. Sorry, Kev. I use mostly Celestron stuff.
Oh no,
So
that's totally fine. We
yeah,
talk about all different types of
yeah,
equipment
yeah,
on
yeah.
here. So.
Anyway, it's your sister company, so so basically, no. When it comes to planetary imaging, aperture rules. But I would say the minimum to use would be probably an 8-inch telescope. Either you use a Schmidt-Cassegrain or a Maxitov, or uh, at least a high focal length telescope. The bigger the telescope, of course, the more resolution you get. Of course, you have to make sure that your location would support the resolution that you have. But even with an 8-inch telescope, you can get respectable image. In the three image, the one on the left is an 8-inch, the one in the middle is a 11-inch, and the one on the furthest right is a C14, a 14-inch. So you can see the difference of the resolution. But even with the 8-inch, you can see a lot of details that are scientifically useful. Now, when it comes to cameras, everybody asks me which one to go, color or monochrome. At first, actually, as late as 2 years ago, I was like, you have to go monochrome. Uh, you know, Monochrome is the only way to go. But lately, I've been using also color cameras because number one, color is simple. It's easier to process, faster to set up, and I would recommend color camera for beginners. But there's a problem with color cameras. When you're imaging planets below, I would say 70, 60 degrees, you have a problem called atmospheric dispersion. And you can notice this when you look at the planets at low altitude, when one side is red and the other side is blue. So the three colors will not focus on the same plane. So if you're planning to use a color cam, I've been able to use a color cam for as low as I think 55 degrees without using ADC or advanced atmospheric dispersion corrector. If in for this year here in North America, you're lucky because Jupiter is getting very high right now. So it's possible to use a color cam without atmospheric dispersion because atmospheric dispersion is a bit, I will have to say, it's a bit complicated to use. Um, one thing you should do is when you do the stacking, there's a RGB alignment feature. Later on, we'll talk about it again. There's an RGB alignment feature in Auto Stacker where you have to press that will compensate on the atmospheric dispersion. So you can do ADCs using software without the hardware if the planet is above about probably 55 degrees from above the horizon. Now, the monochrome is, of course, more sensitive because it doesn't have the bare layers. In color cam, each pixel has about 4 filters RGB. So it's more geared to green than to red and the blue. In monochrome, you have the whole pixel for each color. Of course, the problem with monochrome cam, you need a filter wheel, filters, which are probably more expensive than the camera itself. And the process of processing is also complicated, but in the end, you get actually much better image than a color cam. Is it as better as the details are scientifically valuable details? Unless you have perfect seeing, it's only the only time where the monochrome would really differentiate from a color cam. With average seeing, more or less the resolution will be almost the same, especially when you derotate and stack a lot of images. So this is an image of Jupiter using the color cam. It's quite impressive. I mean, I would never have expected this, but it's something that can be done. I mean, we can get impressive image of the planets using the color cam. Now, what is the best cam right now? I would say the Starvis 2 is the best. Before, it was all about the quantum efficiency. Right now, especially with the introduction of the, I forget the name of the QHY 200M, it's a star sense a sensor. I forgot the name. Another thing came into play, which is noise. We are now having cameras which are very low noise. Right now, I'm using the QHY 53678M. QHY is the only currently the only manufacturer that's making the monochrome version of this camera. So why is this so impressive? To give an idea, using the 290M, it would take me about 15 to 16 RGB sequence to get a good image of Saturn. That's equivalent to about almost 45 minutes to 1 hour of data capture. With this new camera, it only takes me about 18 minutes to get a comparable image. So the time saving is huge. You spend less time imaging and you can try other filters. So it's not just the sensitivity that's the advantage of this camera, but the low noise. And I think in the future, as Sony releases more advanced CCD sensors, this will be the game changer. Lower and lower noise cameras.
Well, and according to that documents, the filter documents that you had there, it shows that it's pretty high in the near infrared too. So if you're doing like methane or any of the specialty stuff, that camera right there, it goes far and beyond just the simple RGB imaging. You can start to get to the more exotic filters.
And if you look at the monochrome cam, look at the UV.
Yeah.
It's actually quite impressive, although it's not in the graph, but it's pretty high. The UV sensitivity is pretty high, and actually, this is not the first one that has high IR sensitivity. Even the 462 camera of Sony has very high near infrared QE. The only difference is this one is much lower noise. I mean,
Mm-hmm.
it's something that really amazes me because when it comes to noise, things the images are grainy. Later on, I'll show you an image of Saturn, which is just a single 1 minute capture, and you can see all the data there. So noise is the new thing now. Of course, later on we'll talk about methane band imaging. Before the 462, we used to do binning when capturing a methane band image, starting with a 462 and this camera. It's no longer necessary. We can get very very high resolution. This is actually revolutionizing the quality of the image, the details that we're capturing in methane band. So we'll go
That's
to the
cool.
next. We'll talk about methane band later on because I have a whole subject of that later. Now, so are things that you'll need uh, to magnify the image. You need a Barlow now. Before, when you were doing film imaging, we used to use eyepiece projection. Now it's no longer necessary because of the small pixel size of these cameras. All you need is a Barlow. In fact, I just got a new Barlow. This is a custom-made Siebert Barlow for the 460 678 camera. The thing about the 678 camera, it has very small pixels, about 2 microns, compared to 2.9 microns with a 462, the 290. So it's small. So I had a custom-made 1.3x Barlow, so just so that I don't need to do binning with the 678.
Mm.
One thing you also need is the motorized filter wheel. This is very important. So when you're imaging planets, you have limit, especially with Jupiter and Saturn, which rotates very fast. You have limited amount of time to get the full RGB. So having a filter wheel will also help you prevent vibration. Next, you need RGB filters if you're doing monochrome. Special filters like UV, IR, methane band. Make sure that the IR and the UV filters that you have do not have a leak. One time I bought a UV filter. I won't tell the brand, but it's one of the bigger brands. Uh, the problem I had was that it had an IR leak. And there was another time where I bought a 800 nanometer pass filter. And I think I was trying to image Uranus. I was wondering, why is it so bright? And I discovered that it had a UV leak. So check the graphs, the bandpass graphs of each of the filter you use before buying them. The methane band, I know there are two types of methane band available right now. One is the one from China, which is a narrower band, and I think it's about 8 or 9 nanometer bandpass. And there's a also methane band filters sold here in the U.S. made by Chroma and also Custom Scientific. They're of course a lot more expensive, but they have an 80 nanometer bandpass, and that's what I'm using right now.
Yeah, I
Because
had a chroma methane for a little while. It was quite a filter, but you do need to know what you're doing with it. So.
yes, it does. But but even the one from China, it's good, but it's very very narrow. You need longer exposures. In fact, I would need binning, so it defeats the purpose of having that new camera. But the details are about the same. And another thing that's important is a flip mirror. I know it's difficult to find, but at 3 in the morning, trying to get a small planet in the center of a chip is can be frustrating without a flip mirror. And
Mm-hmm.
I've been through that, and I just had a flip mirror to get things easier, or else you easily get frustrated when your brain is working only at 20%.
Yeah, I don't
Next,
know about many flip mirrors. Now, I know Vixen had a decent flip mirror. I don't know if they still even sell them. And then
yeah,
Mead had a humongous flip mirror.
yeah,
Um, I think Botter sells one now too, but
yeah,
I'm not exactly sure. You'd have to do some digging. So,
yeah. In fact, I'm using an ancient one, a Homer, made
not
by Andy
familiar with
Homer.
that one, but
I bought this in the uh, early 90s,
mm,
mid 90s. That was the early days of CCD imaging when I was still using the SBIG. ST9. So yeah. Next, you need a for Cathode optics. You need a Crayford focuser, which really makes things fine focusing much easier. And lastly, this is an accessory that many people neglect, especially when you're imaging in hard surfaces. This is inexpensive, the vibration suppression pods. This really helped me a lot, even when I'm using an Astrophysics 900 mount, which is really very stable. But I image on my veranda, which is concrete, and whenever a family member would start walking around the house, the whole thing would vibrate like crazy. With this accessory, it cuts the vibration almost to none. Uh, it basically converts high frequency vibration to low frequency vibration. So it makes it basically, the software can handle that. So this is a small accessory that is can be very important. Now, preparation. This is something which is also very important. Because if you don't prepare, many people would say, "Oh, it's just bad seeing," but a lot of times it's the preparation. Uh, the first thing you should do, go to this website. You can see the website there. It shows the live jet stream or how the jet stream is at any given moment. Now, the thing is, if you're under the jet stream, forget about imaging, just go to bed. It's just not worth it. So here in North America, jet stream is worse around winter. It starts actually in fall, but worse in winter, and best right now during summer. You hardly have. I don't think you have jet stream right now, or very light jet stream at this very moment. So this is just go to that website so you'll know your current situation, whether it's worth going out imaging or not. Now, what is the best location for planetary imaging? Of course, they would say close to the equator, away from the jet stream, in a small island where you have good laminar flow, and of course, close to the equator where the planets are higher. But here in the U.S., there are a lot of places where I see, people getting very, very impressive images. Some here in California, in Florida, even I think as high as New Jersey. So yeah, it's possible. One thing you should take care of is stay away from hot surfaces. This is the biggest enemy. In my case, since I image on concrete, what I would do is about around 4 o'clock in the afternoon, I would spray the ground with water, just hose it down just to cool it off, so that when I image in the evening, I don't have a problem with, heat plumes. Stay away from chimneys, hot asphalts. If if air conditioning is a terrible heat source, so you just stay away from these. If you're close to a body of water, that will really help improve your seeing. This is another important step to cool your telescope. You need to get your OTA at ambient temperature. Without it, it's not worth imaging. You'll get a jelly bean instead of a planet.
Mhm.
So cooling down is very important. The bigger your telescope, the longer it takes to cool. In my C14 takes about 3 to 4 hours without fan. When the fan is on, probably 45 minutes. So yeah, you have to cool the telescope.
I would probably state real quick. Chris uses a standard C14, not an Edge HD. So some of these fans, like the one you see here, that goes up into the draw tube or the center baffle of the telescope, that's not a problem. But if you have an Edge HD, which has corrective elements in the back, you need to pay very close attention not to use these fans that go up inside.
Actually, I don't use this fan anymore. I have a built-in fan.
Oh, okay.
I got one. There's a company in Phoenix. I forgot the name.
Deep Space Products.
Deep Space Products. Yeah, they have a fan there that you install into the vent of the telescope, and yeah, it works very well. That's what I use now with the C14, and it takes about 45 minutes to cool with that fan. And one thing nice about the fan, it's a maglev fan. Even when you're imaging, you can probably get away with it a little bit, but there's still some effects. Oh yeah, one thing I forgot about the CCD. Is it worth using a cooled cam? I actually used a cooled cam a few years ago, and the problem I had was when you turn on the cooling system and the fan starts rotating, the image quality just goes south.
Hmm.
Yeah, it affects the, especially when you're imaging at very high resolution, the whole thing just vibrates.
That
So
would make sense. I that's a good thing that you brought that up because it's not. I haven't done planetary imaging in years because here in Phoenix I've tried and it's
mm,
like forget it. So
yeah, yeah, it's better here in California.
my
Actually,
buddy Paul Maxim, I'm not sure how he does it here in Phoenix, but I think he's just figured out that 10" is about the maximum aperture we can use here.
yeah, yeah. One thing I like about Paul is that he has nightly data, and he's part of my team actually. That we image. He contributes to a group that I I work with, and basically, I really admire his. He images every night, so he
Yeah,
has all
Paul's
the
out
data
there
there.
all
Yeah,
the time.
all the
So
time. Yeah. Yeah, but yeah, it's these little things have to take care of to get the best possible image, and the cooling is really really very important. Yeah, as you said, in some cases, having the biggest aperture might not work, so just get the best aperture for your location.
mm-hmm.
And another thing is to collimate your OTA. This is so important. And the thing is, it's not just visual collimation. You have to collimate uh, in camera. And one thing I do for final collimation was, when you do a little, was it in focus? No, no, a little out focus just before, the ring would collapse into the star. I would go to that and make sure that the ring is evenly illuminated. That's my final collimation. Just that it's the last and the last ring before the whole thing collapses into a star. And when you do collimation, you can go to a star high. I One thing I noticed with the newer Schmidt Cassegrains, and I'm sure with your Max, uh, uh, unlike before when you move to different parts of the sky, the collimation changes. One thing I noticed with my new C14, it doesn't do that anymore. So it
Hmm.
keeps collimation wherever I point it. Of course, I use a dovetail plate to hold actually a separate. Not the one that comes with the telescope, but
You're using like the Los Mondi.
I use a far point.
Okay, yeah, they have the radius blocks on them rather than being like aluminum,
Yeah, yeah, yeah,
one full aluminum piece. They're actually have radius blocks, then the dovetail mates to the
yeah, yeah,
radius block.
yeah, and actually that helps a lot, preventing the change in collimation. So I would just get a star 70 degrees above and use IR filter when seeing is not so good, and make sure that even illumination, that's very critical, that even illumination, then you have a perfect collimation. Next, of course, this is not a problem with newer cameras, but no, newer telescopes, but most old telescopes, you need a lock, especially with the C14, C11. If you can lock the mirror, it's good. My experience with my new C14, I don't need to lock it anymore. So, and I'm sure the Max that you have also don't need locks. So,
Yeah, they don't have a lot of mirror flop, but we're also not pushing a 14-inch primary
yeah,
either. So,
yeah. So it's not necessary anymore. So, but for those of you who have older C14s, which are a good deal right now in Astromart, so it's a good option to have a mirror lock. So lastly, planning. You always plan your imaging. There's a free software called WinJupos that if it has a ephemerides function, and one thing you can do is you can check whether the great red spot can be seen or if there's a moon eclipse that's happening. Uh, it's good. You check what's going on, so you'll know what features you'll be imaging for the night. So WinJupos is a software. It's a freeware. You can download it, and yeah, you can see exciting events like mutual eclipses on the moons, uh, these things you can see with this software. Now we're going to go to image capture. Now the software that's being used for image capture now is fire capture. I know a lot of people would, some people would use SharpCap, but I find fire capture to be far more superior for planetary imaging because all your controls are there. You don't have to dig up the menu to get any control to change the filter and everything. Everything is right there. No, the fire capture is built for planetary imaging. And it doesn't only control your camera and filter wheel, it can even control your telescope and focuser. So it's a complete package. Everything is run through ASCOM. One important thing that I would say recommend is, or not just recommend, but because right now it's the official NASA file naming convention that we're using for when you're doing planetary imaging, we support a lot of spacecraft right now. We have Juno. Before we had Cassini, and in the coming years we're going to have JUICE, which was launched to Jupiter a few months ago, and next year in October we have Europa Clipper, which is going to Jupiter. So we have about 3 spacecraft that we're going to be supporting. And one thing nice about these spacecraft is that we have a group where amateur imagers and professional astronomers go together, work together, and they basically, the professionals now get real-time amateur data. So it's something very important now, and we call it the WinJupos File Naming Convention. This has been the convention used by professional astronomers, and we're just porting it here so that before everything was BAA convention because a British Astronomical Association because of the historical file naming convention. In fact, before we used to use South Side Up. Ever since we did collaboration with professionals, everything is north side up, and we have a specific file naming convention now. So this is done automatically by the software. So just check this WinJupos file naming, and you're good to go. Now, when you're imaging planets, a lot of people ask me, what settings do you use? And every time I will tell them, when you ask me this question, it's like asking somebody, what gear do you use to drive a car? Mm. So, it's not, there's no such thing as a specific setting. In fact, I use variable gain. I use auto histogram. So the gain basically goes, whatever the sky condition is. If there's a cloud that passed by, gain would go up and down. And each telescope, each camera, each setting and setup that I have different, even objects. I have different settings. I have different settings for Mars, different settings for Jupiter, and different settings for Saturn. And the settings for different telescope, when I have a new telescope, I go through the same process of finding the best settings. And there's no such thing as common specific settings. So
unlike deep sky imaging, where if you mess with the gain, you have to go back and redo like your calibration frames, like the flats and biases and darks.
Yeah.
That's not as big of a problem as it is in planetary because you're not really taking those calibration frames at this point.
Yes, that's true. And the thing is, you're trying to capture something very fast. And example, if the clouds would start rolling in, so transparency goes down. The camera, the computer has to adjust the situation, or you can adjust it manually. But there's one guide that's important, and that is the histogram. Now, I will talk about histogram in a few moments because each planet has a specific histogram setting. So instead of talking about the gain setting and exposure time, you can work through it through your system, through your computer, through your camera, whatever setup you have, and get the best for you the best. It's trial and error, but have the histogram as a guide. The histogram will determine your gain and exposure time. Now, for the color cameras, one thing, ever since I had webcam, I never used a color cam. Uh, it was a surprise for me when I first used a color cam 2 years ago, that when I look at the image, oh, it's black and white. Then I started to panic. Is there something wrong with my camera? Then I found out it was in RAW mode. So you have to debayer it. When you capture in fire capture RAW mode and you debayer in auto stacker. Now, when you're capturing when you're capturing, you should notice that the camera or the sensors are built for the human eye. So it's green heavy. As I said earlier, the filter of each pixel is RGB. So it's G heavy. You will have to adjust the red and the blue. We call it W red, W green, W blue. This is a feature in fire capture where you can adjust. You can see the W red, green, and blue in the other setting. And what I actually do is I get a white paper and use it as white balance to white balance the camera. And this is something that you should do, or else your planets will look green.
Do you do that with the camera on the telescope, or you just use it with the
Yes,
camera?
it
Okay.
has to be on the telescope because remember, the telescope has its own, the coatings and everything, and of course you have to go through the filters. Even your luminance filter might have the transmission might not be perfect. So yeah, it's something that you have to do. Everything has to be in situ. Everything as you would image, everything should be there. And of course, you do the debayer in AutoStacker. Now, once you do the debayer, there's a lot of debayer settings. You have to play with the one that gives you the realistic image. Each camera has different settings for the debayer. Each color camera, so you have to do trial and error to see which is the right one. In fact, it's so funny. When you image, in the east, and when you go to the west, you normally flip it, right? Flip F, flip X and Y. And what happened when you process, the Bayer sequence that's used for the east is different from the west. So you have to you have to be mindful of that, especially when you're batch processing with AutoStacker. You'll notice that when it shifts to west, oh, why is the color weird now? So this is something you have to keep in mind. So here are the capture secrets. First of all, this is the general capture secrets. Find the sweet spot of your imaging system. This is really trial and error. I know a lot of people are impatient. Everybody wants instant everything, but that's not possible. You have to be patient, do trial and error, and sometimes you'll find something better, even though you've been imaging for more than 10, 20 years. There's always something new. Even in my case, I learned a lot from other people, their experience, what they do. There's no such thing as, yeah, okay, you're an expert and that's it. Things change. In fact, one problem with writing a book about planetary imaging is that as soon as it's published, it's already what you call it. It's out of date.
Mm-hmm.
So
like most of the cameras that are on the market, the minute you get a new one, it's
yes,
like 6 months later, it's like this new one's better. So
yeah. Not only that, my processing is so totally different from 2 years ago. So the way I process, the way I do things evolved, and I learn from others. There's also one thing: if the seeing is bad, use faster frame rate. Don't worry about having a very high gain, uh, because with the rotation, it's not a problem. You can capture close to even to 1 hour just to get a good image. So just use a fast frame rate that will freeze the brief moment of good seeing. Next is spend time to focus the telescope. If seeing is good, it's much easier. But if seeing is bad, I would recommend you go to one of the moons of Jupiter, like Io, especially Io or Europa. And for Saturn, I would use the Cassini division. Just look at the Cassini division. No, I know there's a lot of focus aids, but even autofocus, these things, it doesn't work. What I normally do is what I call jogging. So I would count the steps for in and out focus. So I go in, then out, back, and basically determine the midpoint. It's kind of crude, but it works a lot much better than other. What was that? The one, the screen on the that you place on your objective on the front of the telescope.
Oh, a Bantoff mask.
Yeah, that doesn't work for planetary, unfortunately. One thing is that yeah, use the rotation to fight bad seeing and poor transparency. That's why even if when I get good seeing and even if there's a lot of clouds, I can get a respectable image. And of course, capture plenty of data because in the end you can just derotate the hell out of it.
Mm-hmm.
But if seeing is so bad, then anything below 5 is not worth it. 6, 7, you can basically, shall we say, do some magic. But beyond that, it's not really worth it. The final image quality depends on your capture quality. So make sure everything is in focus. You have, the tube is, those little things that you prepare. The tube is ambient temperature. These little things all contribute to a good image. So
that's one thing that I've talked to people over the years about. A lot of here at Skywatcher, we deal with a lot of people who are doing mainly deep sky imaging. And there's a lot of people, it's like, well, it's very, imaging's difficult. It's like, well, all aspects of imaging is difficult, but deep sky, I feel, is more difficult from a equipment side of things because you have a bunch of things that have to work right in order to get your shot.
Yes.
Where planetary, I actually think planetary is the hardest of all the imaging, lunar, solar, planetary, deep sky. Out of all four, planetary I think is the most difficult because the difficulty does not come from the equipment, it comes from nature. So the difficulty is a monster variable that you have no control over. Where deep sky and solar and lunar, you have a little bit more say with it because you're not having to be so precise, that where planetary is a lot more precise.
Yeah, that's in a sense that's true, but deep sky can also be, the complexity is much more than the planetary.
They all have their own set of it just depends on, it's basically pick your poison. What do you want to deal with? So
well, in the end, when you talk about this imaging, we're here to have fun. Yeah, it's nothing in life is really easy. And the thing is, everybody wants instant gratification, and I think that's why this small telescope, the Unistellar, is so hot right now. That without doing anything, you can get something. But in the end, even when you use that, it comes to a point that I want something better.
Yeah, and you want to have that control over it. And it doesn't matter what you're into, whether it's, astrophotography or music, or I do fish tanks, as you advance through a hobby, you find the idiosyncrasies that you're like, oh, well, I want to have, this or that. And you find these little, like in astronomy, like you said with Unistellar, you are getting your feet wet and you're doing some good stuff, but then you're going to be like, well, I want to do narrowband. Okay, well, now you need a monochrome camera. Or, oh, I want to do this. It's like, well, now you need this. And you step away from everything being in one easy little complete little package to where you want to start having those micro controls over everything. And that's where you start to kind of ink out more capability from your system. But with that comes an immense amount of patience, which I've told people before too on the webcast, where patience is the one thing you cannot buy as an accessory. That is what, and it's the most important one, is you have to be able to go out and just accept that you're gonna fail on some nights. And I know you haven't gotten where you are
Yeah,
I'm sure you've had
that's
plenty of
true.
nights where you're just yelling at your system because it's not working the way or it just, you
Oh,
wasted a whole night and you just trash a whole set of data. So,
I've been through that. In fact, there was one time that when I plugged the camera, I don't know what happened. Um, uh, it was only capturing at USB 1.1 speed,
oh my God.
and I spent the whole night like, oh God.
You might as well just go get a rock and a tablet and start chiseling the image into it at that point.
But these things happened, and yeah, que sera sera. Yeah, I mean, it's patience, and in a sense, it also teaches you patience. But you get once you get to know, once you get to have your routine, things get easier. And but it's always the first time that's hard. But keeping everything in perfect condition or remembering to keep things ever, because what one problem also, we have a problem with memory. We think everything was set up, then you forget to plug this thing, and you spend the whole night, and oh, the auto guider wasn't working.
Oh yeah, I've done that at events. I've had a knob out and I didn't know why it was pointing the wrong way, and somewhere along the way we bumped the one of the longitude or latitudes went from one direction when it was supposed to be another, and it was this stupid little thing, but you just, if something gets bumped and you don't pay attention to the setting, it messes up the entire chain. So you have to go back one at a time, which is a common thing in astrophotography where it's like, I'm doing everything right. You probably think you are,
Yeah, but you
but
miss on the basics.
yeah, and it happens to every one of us. Something
Yeah.
happens. I can't tell you how many times I've wanted to chuck my filter wheels into the wall because the USB cable decided not to function anymore, and it's the
Oh,
dumbest thing on earth, and it's
yeah,
the cable. So,
yeah. That's why in my house I have a stock of cables, uh, batteries, cables, everything. I have a spare of everything, even the astrophysics cables that I have for
yep.
the mount. I have an extra on everything because there was one time my can controller died. I was like, ah. So I had to rig up to control my telescope with my laptop, and oh God,
It
it was
happens. It's always it's I. There's so many times people will be like, my mount's not working. It's like $20. It's a cable, and 9 times out of 10,
yeah,
it's some, whether it's the power cable, controller cable.
yeah,
USBs are the biggest culprit.
yeah.
I don't
USB is the worst.
I know everyone nowadays is on like this USB kick. It's like, I don't want to use serial cables. I would pay major money to go back to serial connectors because they lock in place and they don't move. And although the
There,
new USB Cs are a lot better than like the old B ones were,
mm.
but yeah, I would gladly go back to serial cables because they're just
No,
nicer.
actually, one time while imaging, I accidentally pulled the C because it's not locked.
Yeah, we need like thread-on connectors, like when they use fiber optic
Yeah, yeah,
connector. I mean, I know fiber optic is the ultimate future of stuff. We just are not quite there
there
yet
yet.
on a
Yeah,
grand scale. But
yeah.
these
In the
cameras,
future, yeah.
I know QHY on their big cameras has fiber optic connection, which a lot of professional observatories are using now, but
Mm.
we haven't quite gotten to the amateur side yet. So,
Yeah, yeah, that's true. Anyway, let's proceed. So
yes.
for Jupiter, these are my recommendation. The histogram between 80 to 95% on all channels, and be mindful of the integration time. In my case, C14, I use 30 seconds. You might go as high as 45 seconds per channel before you can get the details running. Focus using IO and Europa, EO and Europa. So these things will make things easier. For methane band, methane band is very important because it shows the high altitude clouds of Jupiter. So when there's an eruption or a new anticyclonic spot or anything interesting, an impact remnant, these are all bright in methane band. So imaging in methane band is like imaging in deep sky. You need dark frames. When you do dark frames, I would recommend you use only 5 frames I tried using less than 5 and more than 5. It didn't quite work out.
Hmm.
It seems like the magic number is 5 frames. Since you're using a smaller image because it's longer exposure, um, you can capture up to 2 minutes. That's what I do with my methane band image. And right now we can actually capture incredible details with methane band. Now for Saturn, one thing about Saturn, it's very low surface brightness, so you need a lot of data to get a good Saturn image. In fact, I have to use very high gain and even variable frame rates. Of course, the red is faster, the blue is slower. Uh, One thing about Saturn, if you don't want to burn the equator, it always burns the middle equator. You just reduce histogram to 80 to 85% probably, or especially on the green and the blue. The red you can go as high as close to 90, but better around 85 for all channels. You really need the rotation to get a smooth image of Saturn. Now, the easiest planet to image is actually Jupiter. I don't know, no, sorry, Mars. Because number one, it's very high surface brightness, but only when Mars is in opposition, we can get incredible details with Mars. Um, Mars, again, for the histogram, for the red and the green, you can go as high as 90%. For the green and the blue, I would go between eight. Blue has to be 80, green 85%. The total integration time can be as long as 4 minutes because Mars rotates slower. And one thing you should also keep in mind if you're using a RGB or any filter for Mars that it doesn't have a UV-IR leak, or else your Mars is going to look funny.
Hmm.
Okay, so let's go to image processing. Now, the first part of image processing is to stack the image. Now we have AutoStacker. Now, AutoStacker is very easy to use. Make sure that you have the settings here. It's first you have to use planetary. Um, Wait a sec. I'll go to an actual AutoStacker. AutoStacker is much. One thing nice about AutoStacker is it's also it gives better image than the Registax or other stacking software. So what you do is you open first. Let's say you're gonna use this R. This is a Saturn, Jupiter. Yeah, okay. You use a planet, dynamic, and Laplace. You check Laplace, local. This one is auto size. In my case, because my seeing can support it, I use 1.5x and I drizzle it. I use 70% because my seeing is good. Uh, if the seeing is not so good, I lower it. Normalized stack, you can see here normalized stack. I use 70%. This is basically the histogram of your stacked image. If you use 100%, it's gonna be some parts would burn out. If you use a color cam, you see this RGB align. You just check that. This is like using an ADC. It works for up to probably 55 degrees and above. And what you do is you press place AP on grid. This one, don't use grid size too small because if the grid size is too small, you get a lot of funny artifacts. So it shouldn't be too big. It shouldn't be too small. Just medium size. And of course, you just press stack and it will stack. So basically, auto stacker is uh, simple to use. And what I actually do, because the computer I use is quite powerful, I actually process uh, while the camera is capturing. And why is that good? Because remember, I told you the problems before when I captured at slow speed.
Mm-hmm.
Doing that processing, uh, you'll be low. There's something wrong, so you can stop immediately and correct whatever problem there is. Of course, I use a hexa-core laptop, so you need a very powerful computer to do that, to be able to capture and process at the same time. But in the end, you'll know my focus is off. I can do some adjustments, these things, to because if you process after everything, and oh gosh, you spent the whole night like for nothing.
Mm-hmm.
So it's a good for damage control. So stacking, no, this is something very important. The wavelets. People are asking, a lot of software for sharpening, Topaz Labs, these things. I have to tell you that, the most important thing is to have the right wavelet settings. Now, I'll give you an example. This is an image of Jupiter. Okay. So this is how Jupiter looks like after stacking. I have, of course, presets here. So this is what happens when you apply the correct wavelet settings.
Hmm.
Boom.
Yeah, way different.
Now, if you notice this image, yeah, you can sharpen it more, but not a lot. I mean, everything is there. What I
Well,
do
there's a
up,
balance too, because if you over sharpen it, you start to introduce noise
yeah,
again.
and no, not only that, it doesn't look nice. It looks weird. A lot of these fine details get lost,
Mm-hmm.
and you have over contrast and everything. In fact, after this, I just do a slight sharpening, especially in the green and the blue. But when you talk about sharpening, forget about topaz. I do it. I use it for noise reduction. Forget about those other softwares. Try to find the correct wavelet settings. Again, my settings might not work for you. This setting is for my setup, my camera, this image scale. If you use another camera, this setting will be probably over. I mean, this might be too much, or if you have something bigger, it might not be enough. You have to find the correct wavelet. Don't be afraid to play with initial layers, step increments. You just play whatever settings. You never know. You can use what I gave you as a guide. You can lower it, the dials and everything. But this is very important. Getting the right wavelet settings. I know there's a new version of Registex. I haven't really played with it yet. I haven't tried it yet. Probably when I get more time, I will try to play with it. But so far, I initially played with it. I found this to be more easier to use the old version. So I'm a creature of comfort. If I'm comfortable with something, I try to stick with it
If it
because
ain't
it
broke,
works.
don't fix it. So.
Yeah, when it ain't broke, don't fix it. So this is another sample. This is Saturn.
Wow.
So this is a single image of Saturn using the QHY 53 678. This is a single. You can see even the details on the southern hemisphere. You can
Mm-hmm.
already see details, and this is just one set of red. So it's incredible, this new camera. But again, I cannot overemphasize the importance of the correct wavelet settings. This is how it looked before. Now, a lot
That's
of people
great.
say, "Oh, no, I had a perfect capture. What happened after stacking? It's blurry. I couldn't see anything." When you dial up the correct settings, boom.
Yeah, the wavelets are the trick, especially even in solar. I've done that
Mm,
before too,
mm.
where it's like, and then you hit it with the wavelets and play with them. It's like, oh, there it is. So,
There it is. Yeah. So getting the correct wavelet settings is far more important than those you know um, noise ninja or whatever you have there. Again, I would recommend Topaz Labs for noise reduction. The noise is wonderful, but I use the old version of the AI. I actually tried the AI. The problem I have with the AI, I think many of you know, is its propensity to invent details. So we have to be careful. So again, in the end, wavelets, just stick to wavelets. So for RGB, you combine. I use Photoshop to combine. Others use different software. One thing about Regstacks, once it stacks, it saves the file as an RGB file. So you have to convert it to grayscale. So in any case, just use the uh, you know RGB to align. You can use Photoshop. Convert it to grayscale first. Of course, before doing the RGB align, you have to apply wavelets first. then do the RGB align. Then, of course, finally, we have the rotation. Now, the rotation is just like stacking on steroids. If I talk about the rotation, it'll take probably 2 hours, but I have a video somewhere in the internet that talks about the rotation, or probably in the future, Kevin, we can have a session on this on specific aspects of processing that can help people.
Sure.
So I also need
I know
actually
we'd
to
love to
do
have you back.
I actually need to do a new video on this because there are new ways of doing things now. In fact, I think a lot of the things that I said in my previous videos don't apply anymore. So yeah, we'll probably talk about it. So we'll talk about more of the derotation in the future. But in the end, derotation is basically uh, stacking on steroids. It's a two-step process. First is the you need to do the image measurement, and yeah, you can see the instruction here. But it's better if we make a video out of it. A 1 hour video just to talk about derotation, and of course other processing, probably more specific live hands-on we can do in the future. And lastly is the you do the derotation. uh, this is how amazing derotation is. This is a single image, and the one below is a derotated image. You can
Yeah.
see a huge difference in the image quality and the clarity of the planet. In fact, even right now I get much better image than this one. And if you can notice, you can see the dark spots on Saturn, which is quite visible on the derotated image.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So finally, now this thing, sharpening and noise reduction. Again, there are sharpening tools like the DxO Topaz has a sharpening tool, but I rarely use it. Probably if I use it, just if I just do a slight sharpening. But as I said, most of the sharpening done on on Registax wavelets. One tool you can use in Photoshop is the speckle, which can reduce grain and also dust and scratches. And of course, there's also Topaz Labs denoise that can reduce noise. Again, of course, Topaz Labs is not free, so yeah, you have to purchase it. And when you purchase right now, you can only purchase AI. What I did was you can request, just go to tech support and say, can I get a license for the old version? Look, I own the new version. Can I get a license? Because for my work, I need the old version, and they will give you the license. So it's something that I would recommend you guys to if you need to use Topaz Labs, ask for the old version. Now, when we're imaging, one thing that which always I have to keep in mind is what I'm imaging real? Because what's the point of you have this fancy processing routine, and all you're getting are fake images. Once a year, Opal has a run with Jupiter, and whenever I have a new processing, the guys that run Opal are close friends of mine, so more or less I know what time they're imaging. And in this case, you have I think probably 3 minutes apart. You can compare the features of my image on the right with the Hubble image on the left, and you can see a lot of you can really point out a lot of details there. This is so important because unfortunately, uh, even this year, sorry, even this year, there was this guy who had a quite an interesting way of processing. What he did was that he took a part of Saturn and just basically copied it around. It's crazy because what you're doing is it's already an art. It's no longer scientific data, and a lot of our image are used by professionals for for research. And we have to make sure that the data that we get are real. So yeah, this is what I do before I do a new pro, or if ever I do a new process, I try to compare it with reality. And if it's real, then okay, we can use that. If it's not, then okay, we use another method. Something that we have to bear in mind always.
Mm-hmm.
So this is a summary of what I do when I process. Again, I know a lot of people who use a much more complex process to get the finest detail. As I said earlier, in my case, I try to keep it as fast and simple as possible, so I can get to work because I also have a day job to be in the office with my wife because I work for my wife. So everything has to be done at a right time, at a fixed amount of time.
Yes.
So this is how I do it. These are the routines that I do. Okay, and lastly, the final image. Of course, right now it's all north up. You add the central meridian information, observer's name and your location, and of course the total uh, derotation integrating time. These are important for professional astronomers because it helps them contextualize your image, especially for changes in dynamic planets like Jupiter and Saturn. One thing about Jupiter and Saturn, no two images are the same. You know, as, at any given time, those clouds are so dynamic that they change. So what you
Mm-hmm.
take, even if you image at the same location, the next time you image, it's totally different. So this is how dynamic the planet is. So yeah, so it's important you have all those data with you, printed with your image. And of course, archiving before you delete the image, it's good to run your software to Jupiter impact detection software, or the wait a sec. How do you play that again? Anyway, and the or detect because in 2010, specifically June 3, 2010, I was imaging. It was an ordinary night. That normal light, there was no red spot. It was the boring side of Jupiter. You're just out there to image. Then lo and behold, an asteroid strikes Jupiter. So in that case, during that time, Anthony Wesley and I were imaging at the same time. He was the one who noticed it. I wasn't because I was still half asleep. And lo and behold, an asteroid hit Jupiter, and yeah, I was able to confirm his discovery. And in a sense that it was the first ever live impact detection on Jupiter, because when we had Schumacher Levy 9, the impact was on the other side of the planet, so we never saw what the impact looked like.
Mm-hmm.
This time, we saw the impact. We were able to record it. And one thing interesting is that after that, we the impacts we found out is fairly common. So basically, you have two amateur astronomers basically opening a new branch of science in Jupiter study. Then we realized that impacts are common. It's once, twice, or three times a year. So yeah, we basically opened a new branch, and with a lot more imagers imaging the planet now, the chances of impact detection is much much higher now than before. In my case, I compress. I don't really keep all the data. If I have good data, I compress them and basically burn them in Blu-rays. Probably in the future, one of my, the future I can donate this to somewhere. So to have my raw data available for science.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so the goal of planetary imaging is not just to acquire beautiful images. That's why even though the seeing is bad, I still post images, ugly images. But because what's important is to capture science data. I remember one time, many years ago, there was this amateur in Iran. He was taking an image of Saturn, and lo and behold, he imaged a bright spot, which was actually an anomaly, which was discovered by Cassini a few days earlier, and this in turn became the dragon spot. And that dragon spot was basically the largest storm in the solar system because it went around the planet. It was a huge convection storm in Saturn. So that's why I admire Paul Maxon. He may not have the best image, but he has daily image, which is very important for science.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, that's it.
Awesome. Well, thank you very much, Chris. I appreciate you. If you guys need to know all of the information about what Chris is using, there it is right there. I'll let Chris in the share screen when you have a second.
Yeah.
But yeah, Chris, thank you very much for being on with us today. If you guys have any questions, Chris, I think you have a website that they can go visit.
Yeah, or you can message me on Facebook or whatever.
Yeah,
I
you're pretty easy to track down, so
I usually respond, so no problem.
very cool. Let's see. Stop participant sharing. Boop. There's
Okay,
Chris. Awesome. Well, thank you very much, Chris, for coming on. I know you're really busy, so I appreciate you carving out some time for us.
no problem.
For any of you who want to get a hold of Chris, just find him on social media or his website and literally Google Christopher Go and his website will pop up. If you like what you see here, please go ahead and subscribe. Leave a like on the videos. We really appreciate it. Lets us know we're doing a good job. Other than that, we will see you guys next week for What's Up for the month of August. Please have a great weekend, and we will see you guys next week. Take care, everyone. See ya. Bye.
Bye.